What if I told you that the secret to becoming psychologically unbreakable isn't found in modern self-help books, meditation apps, or positive thinking mantras? What if the blueprint for true mental sovereignty was written over a century ago by a man who understood suffering so deeply that he transformed it into his greatest strength? Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who declared God is dead and taught us to dance on the ashes of our old beliefs, left us 8 revolutionary principles that can forge your mind into an unbreakable weapon. But here's the brutal truth. Most people will never apply these principles because they demand something our comfort-obsessed world desperately fears: authentic struggle. Right now, as you're watching this video, you're probably carrying invisible chains. Chains of other people's expectations, chains of societal conditioning, chains of your own limiting beliefs. But what if those chains could become the very tools of your liberation? What if your deepest pain could become your greatest power? In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through Nietzsche's 8 principles for psychological sovereignty. Principles so powerful, they can literally rewire your relationship with suffering, failure, and fear. These aren't feel-good platitudes. These are battle-tested philosophies that have shaped some of history's most resilient minds. But before we begin this journey into the depths of human potential, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Why? Because what you're about to learn will challenge everything you think you know about strength, and you're going to want to revisit these concepts again and again. Also, only about 20% of you watching are actually subscribed, so if this content transforms your perspective even slightly, show some love to the algorithm. Fair warning, principle number 6 about forgiveness will completely shatter your understanding of letting go, and principle 8 will reveal why psychological sovereignty is the most dangerous gift you can give yourself. Every man is a quotation from all his ancestors, but Nietzsche asks us a profound question. What if you could stop being a mere quotation and start being the author? Look around you right now. Your job, your relationships, your daily routines, even your dreams. How much of this is truly yours? How much of your life story has been written by parents who projected their unfulfilled dreams onto you? By teachers who couldn't see beyond standardized metrics? By a society that profits from your predictability? The first principle of psychological unbreakability is perhaps the most radical. You must become the poet of your own existence. Not the critic, not the victim, not even the hero, but the poet. The one who creates meaning from chaos, beauty from pain, and purpose from the seemingly random events of life. Imagine a young person, maybe this was you, sitting in a classroom, being told that success looks like a particular type of career, a specific income bracket, a certain type of relationship. Years pass. They follow the script perfectly, yet they wake up at 35, 45, 55, feeling like a stranger in their own life. They achieved everything they were supposed to want, but they feel empty because none of it came from their authentic creative force. Nietzsche understood that most people sleepwalk through life, accepting the narratives handed to them by others. But the poet of life asks different questions. What if my greatest failure was actually redirecting me toward my true purpose? What if this rejection, this loss, this seemingly random tragedy was the universe's way of editing my story toward something more beautiful? This isn't positive thinking. This is creative sovereignty. When you become the poet of your life, you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "How can I transform this raw material into something extraordinary?" You begin to see that every experience, no matter how painful, is simply more material for your masterpiece. Here's your first assignment. Tonight, before you sleep, write down 3 events from your past that you've labeled as bad or traumatic. Now rewrite each story from the perspective of a poet who sees these events as necessary plot points in an epic tale of becoming. What did each experience teach you? How did it forge your character? What strength did it reveal that you didn't know you possessed? But becoming the poet of your life requires raw material to work with. And that brings us to principle 2, which might be the most counterintuitive path to strength you've ever encountered. What does not kill me makes me stronger. You've heard this quote 1,000 times plastered on gym walls and motivational posters, but do you understand what Nietzsche really meant? He wasn't talking about surviving random hardships. He was talking about deliberately seeking out the exact challenges that terrify you most. Picture an eagle soaring effortlessly through the sky. What allows it to fly? Is it the absence of resistance? No. It's the eagle's masterful dance with resistance, using wind currents, air pressure, even storms to lift itself higher. The eagle doesn't seek calm skies. It seeks the resistance that makes flight possible. Your mind is that eagle. And most people spend their entire lives trying to eliminate resistance, instead of learning to use it as fuel. Think about the most successful people you know, not just financially, but psychologically. The entrepreneurs who bounce back from bankruptcy, the artists who created masterpieces after devastating criticism, the leaders who emerged stronger from public failures. What do they have in common? They didn't avoid resistance. They developed an almost supernatural ability to transform resistance into momentum. But here's what separates Nietzsche's approach from typical embrace challenges advice. He's not telling you to accept whatever difficulties life randomly throws at you. He's telling you to actively seek out the specific types of resistance that will forge the exact strengths you need. If you want to develop unshakable confidence, don't avoid situations where you might be rejected. Seek them out systematically. If you want to build emotional resilience, don't run from difficult conversations. Initiate them. If you want to cultivate intellectual independence, don't surround yourself with people who always agree with you. Actively seek out those who will challenge your most cherished beliefs. This is where most people fail. They want the strength that comes from overcoming resistance, but they want it without the discomfort of actually facing resistance. They want the confidence of someone who's been through fire, but they refuse to enter the flames. They want the wisdom that comes from failure, but they organize their entire lives around avoiding failure. Right now, pause this video for just 10 seconds and ask yourself, what is the one thing you've been avoiding because it scares you? What conversation, what challenge, what opportunity have you been running from? That fear you feel when you think about it, that's your compass pointing toward your next level of strength. Nietzsche would look at our modern culture of safe spaces, trigger warnings, and comfort zones with a mixture of sadness and contempt. Not because he lacks compassion, but because he understands that the very things we're trying to protect people from are the exact experiences they need to become psychologically sovereign. But seeking resistance raises a disturbing question. How do you know which resistance to seek and which to avoid? How do you distinguish between productive struggle and destructive suffering? The answer lies in our third principle, which will force you to question the very foundation of how you judge right from wrong. There are no facts, only interpretations. With these words, Nietzsche detonated a bomb under the foundation of moral certainty that had governed human thinking for millennia. But this isn't nihilism, this is liberation. Every day, you make hundreds of judgments. This is good, that is bad. This person is right, that person is wrong. This experience is positive, that one is negative. But what if I told you that these judgments, the very framework through which you interpret reality, might be the prison preventing you from becoming psychologically unbreakable? Imagine a child who grows up being told that expressing anger is bad, that questioning authority is wrong, that prioritizing their own needs is selfish. This child learns to suppress their anger, never question what they're told, and constantly sacrifice their well-being for others. Society calls this child good. But Nietzsche asks, good for whom? And at what cost? Years later, this good person finds themselves unable to set boundaries, unable to stand up for themselves, unable to pursue their authentic desires. They've been so busy being good according to external standards that they've become strangers to their own power. Nietzsche's third principle isn't about becoming immoral. It's about becoming morally sovereign. It's about recognizing that the values you've inherited from your family, your culture, your religion, and your society aren't objective truths handed down from heaven. They're human constructions, created by specific people in specific contexts for specific purposes. Think about your deepest moral convictions right now, the beliefs you defend with your life, your ideas about success, love, purpose, right and wrong. How many of these beliefs did you consciously choose after careful examination? How many did you simply absorb from your environment, like a sponge absorbs water? This is terrifying territory, because if you truly embrace this principle, you can't blame your limitations on external moral frameworks anymore. You can't say, "I'm not pursuing my dreams because it would be selfish," or "I'm not standing up for myself because it wouldn't be nice." You have to take responsibility for creating your own value system. But here's the liberating truth. When you shatter the inherited tablets of good and evil, you don't become amoral. You become the creator of your own moral code. You get to decide what serves your highest development and what holds you back. You get to determine what kind of person you want to become and what values will guide that becoming. This doesn't mean you become cruel or selfish in the conventional sense. It means you become selfish in the most profound sense. Faithful to your authentic self, rather than to the expectations others have projected onto you. You start asking not, "What would others think?" but "What would the highest version of myself do?" But Nietzsche warns us, this freedom comes with a price. When you stop deriving your sense of right and wrong from external authorities, you must become your own authority. You must develop the wisdom and integrity to guide yourself. This is why psychological sovereignty is not for everyone. It requires taking full responsibility for your choices and their consequences. Here's your assignment. Identify one rule you follow, not because you've consciously chosen it, but because you've been told it's good or right. Maybe it's working in a career that drains you because you believe suffering through work is virtuous. Maybe it's staying in relationships that no longer serve you because you believe loyalty requires self-sacrifice. Question this rule. Trace its origins. Ask yourself, does this serve my authentic development, or does it serve someone else's agenda? But once you've shattered the external tablets of good and evil, you face an even more challenging battle. Because the real enemy of psychological sovereignty isn't outside oppression. It's the internal civil war that rages within every human being. And that leads us to perhaps the most misunderstood of Nietzsche's principles. Man is something that shall be overcome. These might be the most misunderstood words Nietzsche ever wrote. He's not advocating for self-hatred or self-destruction. He's calling for the most necessary war you'll ever fight, the war against your own mediocrity. Right now, there are multiple versions of you coexisting in your psyche. There's the you that wants to transform your life, and the you that's terrified of change. There's the you that dreams of greatness, and the you that finds comfort in small, predictable pleasures. There's the you that craves authentic expression, and the you that desperately needs approval from others. Most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid this internal conflict. They pretend these contradictions don't exist. They choose one side and try to suppress the other. But Nietzsche understood something profound. This internal war isn't a problem to be solved. It's the very mechanism through which psychological strength is forged. Think about the last time you felt truly alive, truly powerful, truly yourself. I guarantee it wasn't during a moment of internal peace and harmony. It was during a moment when you chose your higher self over your lower impulses, when you chose growth over comfort, when you chose authenticity over approval. That moment of choice, that internal victory, is what Nietzsche means by making war upon yourself. This war has many fronts. There's the battle between your desire for immediate gratification and your commitment to long-term goals. There's the conflict between your need for security and your hunger for adventure. There's the tension between your ego's demand for validation and your soul's call for authenticity. But here's what separates Nietzsche's approach from typical self-improvement advice. He's not telling you to eliminate your lower impulses or transcend your human nature. He's telling you to harness these forces, to use the energy of internal conflict as fuel for transformation. When you feel the pull of procrastination, instead of judging yourself as lazy, recognize this as a strategic moment. Your higher self and your comfort-seeking self are in negotiation. This is your chance to consciously choose which voice gets to drive your actions. Each time you choose your higher impulse over your lower impulse, you strengthen your capacity for self-governance. The people who become psychologically unbreakable aren't those who never feel fear, doubt, or temptation. They're those who've learned to use these internal conflicts as training grounds for their will. Every moment of internal resistance becomes a repetition in the gym of self-mastery. Consider your worst habit, your deepest insecurity, your most persistent self-sabotage pattern. Instead of trying to eliminate it, ask yourself, how is this pattern serving me? What is it protecting me from? What would I have to risk or face if I gave it up? Often our weaknesses are actually outdated survival strategies. They once served a purpose, but now they're holding us back. Here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop trying to be perfect and start trying to be authentic, when you stop trying to eliminate your shadows and start learning to dance with them, you develop a kind of psychological flexibility that makes you almost impossible to break. Tonight, I want you to have a conversation with the part of yourself you like least. The part that procrastinates, that people pleases, that avoids difficult conversations, that settles for less than you're capable of. Don't try to fix or change this part. Just listen to it. Understand what it's trying to protect you from, then negotiate with it. Find a way to honor its protective instinct while still moving toward your highest potential. But this internal war, this dance with your shadows, serves a larger purpose. It's not just about self-mastery for its own sake. It's about channeling all of this internal energy towards something greater than yourself. And that brings us to the principle that transforms self-improvement into self-transcendence. What is the ape to man? A laughingstock or a painful embarrassment? And just the same shall man be to the overman. Nietzsche wasn't talking about becoming superhuman in a comic book sense. He was talking about the fundamental drive that separates humans who thrive from humans who merely survive. The will to become more than you currently are. Deep inside you, beneath all the conditioning and fears and social programming, there's a force more powerful than your desire for comfort, more persistent than your need for approval, more fundamental than your fear of failure. It's your will to grow, to expand, to become the fullest expression of your potential. But here's the tragedy of modern life. Most people learn to suppress this will to growth because it's inconvenient, unpredictable, and often socially disruptive. Picture a plant growing in a small pot. At first, the pot provides security, safety, boundaries. But as the plant grows, the same pot that once protected it begins to constrain it. The roots become cramped, the growth stunted. The plant faces a choice: remain safe and small or break through the pot and risk everything for the possibility of becoming what it's truly meant to be. You are that plant. And every area of your life where you feel restless, dissatisfied, or like you're outgrowing your current circumstances, that's your will to growth calling you toward your next evolution. But growth is terrifying because it requires you to leave behind versions of yourself that once served you. It requires you to outgrow relationships that no longer challenge you. It requires you to abandon goals that no longer inspire you. It requires you to disappoint people who prefer you to stay small and predictable. Nietzsche understood that this will to growth can either be your greatest ally or your greatest source of suffering. When it's suppressed, it turns into depression, anxiety, addiction, and self-destructive behavior. When it's channeled consciously, it becomes the force that drives you to create, to love, to build, to become. So how do you channel your will to growth? First, you have to recognize where it's already active in your life. What areas make you feel most alive when you're improving? What skills do you find yourself naturally drawn to develop? What problems do you feel compelled to solve? What impact do you feel called to make? But here's what most self-help approaches miss. Your will to growth isn't just about personal development. It's about contributing to the evolution of human consciousness itself. When you become more than you were yesterday, you're not just improving your own life. You're expanding what's possible for all of humanity. Think about the people who've most influenced your life. The teachers who saw potential in you that you couldn't see in yourself. The friends who challenged you to be better. The artists whose work opened new worlds in your imagination. What made them powerful wasn't their perfection, it was their commitment to growth, their willingness to become more than they were. And this is where psychological sovereignty becomes not just a personal achievement, but a responsibility. When you develop an unbreakable mind, when you learn to transform suffering into strength, when you become immune to the opinions and expectations of others, You become dangerous in the best possible way. You become someone who can inspire others to break free from their own limitations. Here's your growth challenge. Identify the area of your life where you feel most stuck, most frustrated, most limited. Now ask yourself, what would I need to become to transcend this limitation? What skills would I need to develop? What fears would I need to face? What old version of myself would I need to leave behind? Your will to growth already knows the answer. You just need the courage to listen to it. But as you commit to this path of continuous growth, you'll encounter people who hurt you, betray you, or try to pull you back to who you used to be. And how you handle these inevitable wounds will determine whether you become bitter and hard or wise and compassionate. This brings us to perhaps the most counterintuitive principle in Nietzsche's philosophy. The weak cannot forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. Wait, that's Gandhi, not Nietzsche. Because Nietzsche would say, the strong don't need to forgive. They simply overlook. This principle will probably make you uncomfortable, and it should. We've been taught that forgiveness is the highest virtue, the key to inner peace, the mark of emotional maturity. But Nietzsche asks a disturbing question. What if forgiveness is actually a weakness disguised as strength? What if true psychological sovereignty lies not in forgiving, but in becoming so powerful that forgiveness becomes irrelevant? Imagine two scenarios. In the first, someone betrays you deeply. You spend months, maybe years, processing the hurt, working through your anger, finally arriving at forgiveness. You feel proud of your emotional maturity, your capacity for compassion. But notice what's happened. This person's actions have occupied your mental and emotional energy for months or years. They've had power over your inner state long after they've left your life. In the second scenario, someone betrays you deeply. You feel the initial sting, you understand what happened, and then you overlook it. Not because you're suppressing your emotions, not because you're in denial, but because you've become so focused on your own growth, your own mission, your own becoming, that this person's actions simply don't register as significant enough to derail your attention. Overlooking isn't the same as ignoring or suppressing. It's not pretending the hurt didn't happen. It's developing such a strong sense of your own worth and direction that other people's actions toward you, positive or negative, don't have the power to define your reality. Think about the grudges you're currently carrying, the resentments that still trigger you when you remember them, the people who owe you apologies that will probably never come. How much mental real estate are these grievances occupying? How much energy are you investing in being right about how wrong they were? Nietzsche understood something profound about human psychology. The very act of needing to forgive gives power to the person who hurt you. It makes their opinion of you, their treatment of you, their acknowledgement of your worth somehow necessary for your peace of mind. But what if their opinion simply didn't matter? What if their actions were like rain falling on a mountain, noted but not internalized? This doesn't mean becoming cold or heartless. It means developing such a strong internal compass that external validation or punishment becomes irrelevant to your self-concept. When someone disrespects you, instead of needing them to acknowledge their wrongdoing, you simply adjust your relationship with them accordingly and move forward with your life. There's something incredibly liberating about this approach. Instead of carrying the burden of forgiving those who've wronged you, you simply rise above the entire paradigm of victim and perpetrator. You become like the sun, shining your light regardless of whether people appreciate it or not, continuing your journey regardless of who tries to block your path. But be careful not to confuse overlooking with suppression. Suppression says, I won't feel this pain. Overlooking says, I feel this pain, I understand its source, and I choose not to let it define my trajectory. It's not about becoming invulnerable, it's about becoming anti-fragile. Here's your overlooking practice. Think of someone who hurt you that you're still carrying resentment toward. Instead of trying to forgive them, try this. Write down exactly what they did and how it affected you. Then write down who you've become as a result of that experience, the strength you've developed, the wisdom you've gained, the boundaries you've learned to set. Now ask yourself, was this experience, painful as it was, actually a gift that redirected you toward a better version of yourself? But achieving this level of psychological sovereignty requires you to develop comfort with something that terrifies most people: uncertainty. Because when you stop needing others to validate your worth, when you stop waiting for the world to make sense according to your expectations, you have to learn to navigate life without the safety net of absolute certainty. And that brings us to a principle that will shake the very foundation of how you approach decision-making. The most common form of human stupidity is forgetting what one is trying to accomplish. But Nietzsche knew something even more profound. The second most common form of human stupidity is thinking you can accomplish anything significant while clinging to the illusion of certainty. Right now, you're probably living a carefully constructed life designed to minimize uncertainty. You have routines that make you feel in control, plans that give you the illusion of knowing what's coming next, beliefs that provide simple answers to complex questions, and all of these certainties are slowly suffocating your potential. Certainty is seductive because it promises safety. If you can just figure out the right formula, the correct path, the perfect strategy, then you can avoid failure, rejection, and disappointment. But here's what Nietzsche understood that most people never learn. The very pursuit of certainty is what keeps you trapped in mediocrity. Think about every significant breakthrough in your life. Every moment when you leveled up, when you discovered a new capacity within yourself, when you achieved something you previously thought impossible. I guarantee none of these breakthroughs happened while you were in your comfort zone, following a predictable path with guaranteed outcomes. They happened when you took a risk, when you said yes to an opportunity you weren't sure you could handle, when you left a situation that was comfortable but limiting, when you bet on yourself despite not knowing how things would turn out. Here's the paradox. True psychological strength doesn't come from knowing you can handle anything. It comes from knowing you can handle not knowing. It comes from developing such trust in your own adaptability that you don't need to control outcomes to feel secure. But abandoning the shore of certainty doesn't mean making reckless decisions or living in chaos. It means becoming comfortable with making the best decision you can with incomplete information, then adapting as new information emerges. It means holding your plans lightly, your beliefs provisionally, your identity fluidly. Most people pay a terrible price for their attachment to certainty. They stay in jobs that drain them because they know what to expect. They remain in relationships that no longer serve them because the unknown feels more threatening than the known dissatisfaction. They avoid pursuing their dreams because they can't guarantee success. But what if uncertainty isn't the enemy of security? What if it's the price of freedom? What if the very things you're trying to avoid by clinging to certainty, failure, rejection, disappointment, are exactly the experiences you need to become psychologically unbreakable? So how do you navigate without the compass of certainty? Nietzsche suggests you develop what he calls intellectual probity, a commitment to truth over comfort, to reality over fantasy, to growth over security. Instead of asking, what's the safe choice? You start asking, what's the choice that will teach me the most about what I'm capable of? This might mean leaving a stable career to pursue work that aligns with your values, even though you don't know if you'll succeed financially. It might mean ending a comfortable relationship to seek deeper connection, even though you don't know if you'll find it. It might mean moving to a new city, starting a new project, or expressing an unpopular opinion, even though you can't predict the consequences. But here's what happens when you abandon the shore of certainty. You discover that you're far more adaptable, resilient, and capable than you ever imagined. You stop needing life to conform to your expectations and start dancing with whatever emerges. You become anti-fragile, someone who actually gets stronger in response to uncertainty and chaos. Your certainty challenge: identify one area of your life where you've been avoiding taking action because you can't guarantee the outcome. Maybe it's a conversation you need to have, a project you want to start, a change you want to make. What's one small step you could take toward that uncertainty this week? Not a giant leap, just one small step that moves you away from the false security of the known toward the genuine adventure of the unknown. But all of these principles, becoming the poet of your life, seeking resistance, shattering moral tablets, making war upon yourself, channeling your will to growth, overlooking rather than forgiving, abandoning certainty. All of these serve one ultimate purpose. They're all in service of the final principle, the crown jewel of Nietzsche's philosophy, the state of being that makes you truly psychologically unbreakable. He who would learn to fly one day must first learn to stand and walk and run and climb and dance. One cannot fly into flying. And now, after walking through 7 principles that have challenged everything you thought you knew about strength, we arrive at the destination: psychological sovereignty. What is psychological sovereignty? It's not about becoming a cold, isolated individual who needs no one. It's not about achieving some impossible state of perfection where you never feel doubt, fear, or pain. Psychological sovereignty is the ability to remain fundamentally yourself, regardless of external circumstances. When you've become the poet of your life, you create meaning instead of waiting for it to be given to you. When you seek the highest resistance, you become anti-fragile instead of merely resilient. When you've shattered the tablets of good and evil, you become morally self-determining instead of externally controlled. When you make war upon yourself, you become internally integrated instead of conflicted. When you channel your will to growth, you become a force of evolution instead of a victim of circumstance. When you overlook instead of forgive, you become psychologically independent instead of emotionally dependent. When you abandon the shore of certainty, you become adventurous instead of anxious. This is what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of becoming who you truly are. Not discovering some fixed identity that was always there, but creating yourself through conscious choice, deliberate action, and the courage to become more than you currently are. The path to psychological sovereignty isn't easy. It requires you to question everything, to face your shadows, to risk everything comfortable for something authentic. But the alternative is spending your entire life as a character in someone else's story, living by someone else's values, limited by someone else's definition of what's possible. You have one life, one chance to see what you're truly capable of, one opportunity to become psychologically unbreakable. The question isn't whether you're ready. The question is whether you're willing to begin. If this video has stirred something in you, if you feel the call to start becoming sovereign, then subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to hear these ideas. And most importantly, choose one principle, just one, and start applying it to your life today. The age of psychological mediocrity is ending. The age of sovereignty is beginning. The only question is, will you be part of the transformation, or will you watch from the sidelines as others become what you could have been? The choice, as always, is yours. Choose sovereignty.